shape change, jump in the mutagenic pool, and drown with friends again and again. Welcome to a Mutant Manifesto, Episode 4. In this one, we will be going over A Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway that came out in 1985, and just loosely discussing it and how it relates to a mutant manifesto. Personally, A Cyborg Manifesto and Donna Haraway in general are big inspirations for the project that we are currently undertaking with a Mutant Manifesto, where we essentially are doing a collaborative writing project to create this manifesto that will evolve with each episode, while sort of unpacking a sort of post-structuralist, post-humanist approach to politics, culture, art, and just existence in this entangled era that we live in. Donna Haraway was a big, she's a biology background, so she's like this. She's a STEM lord, but she also has big commitments to all sorts of entangled movements regarding Marxism, socialism, feminism, ecofeminism, sort of like an internationalist approach towards like coalition building, interspecies approach to coalition building. A Cyborg Manifesto, which came out in 1985, was her sort of debut contribution to these fields. As far as like what was, it went kind of viral before social media was officially really here, and it sort of like preempted a lot of the conditions that we live in currently in this sort of very much technologically driven, atomized, and yet very much collective and viral world that we live in currently. She also has a lot of work on like abhuman, like primates and companion species such as dogs, for example. And then also her more recent book, Staying with the Trouble, Making Kin in the Thulucene, Making Oddkin in the Thulucene, which came out in 2016, I believe, is like one of my favorite texts of all time. It's like I'm a big fan of it. It's like an ecofeminist, just sort of psycho combination of so many different threads that are woven together so poetically and so like interestingly. But yeah, I wanted to start with the Cyborg Manifesto because I feel like it relates to a lot of different themes that we've already gone through in a mutant manifesto so far. And it is very much a direct sort of predecessor for a mutant manifesto. But I have Josh and Carson on today. And we are just gonna kind of go through it. We're just gonna start like unpacking it. Like, what does it mean to be a cyborg? How does that differ from being a mutant? What are the opportunities and shortcomings of each category? And what does Donna Haraway's writing in this manifesto have to offer us? And where do we perhaps differ from it? Yeah. Carson, Josh, hello.
How's it going?
Hey,
Absolutely illustrious introductions from both, as always. So, where to begin with A Cyborg Manifesto? This is both of y'all's first time reading this book, or this text, right?
Yeah.
I think I tried to start reading it years ago, but I think at the time it was like not making any sense to me, and I gave up pretty quick.
So, how would you, summarize in brief, like the impact it had on you this time around?
Well, honestly, I was shocked that I liked it so much this time. I was going into it kind of thinking that it was going to be that I wasn't going to jive with some of it. I don't really know why. I'm like pretty surprised this was written in like the 80s, like pre-internet, and also was written before some things that I had read that I was like Like if either of you have ever read or heard of Empire, like the Tony Negri and Michael Hart, like that. It came out in like 2000, like I don't know, huge like political philosophy book, and I've read parts of that in the past like couple years. And reading this, I was like, this sounds like a lot of stuff that was also in that book, but like precedes it by like 15 years, and specifically parts on like language and like warfare and like information and I guess what kind of became to be known as cybernetics. And yeah, so I was really like, wow, she's doing like a lot of stuff here. It's like she's like interrupting like theory, I guess, of like how does this relate to like feminist thought, like gender theory, specifically like she brings up like Audre Lorde and Adrienne Rich and Judith Butler. Yeah, but then also like how does this disrupt like science and like science studies and biology, I guess, as a field. And then also like stuff to do with yeah, language and like sci-fi and postmodern whatever, postmodern lit or postmodern like writing and theory. But so I was like, yeah, I was into all of it. She was doing a lot, and I feel like I kind of structured it like that. Like, what sort of like interjections is she making into certain fields that feel pretty like massive and seems like it changed the game a bit. But
Totally. This text comes around right when cybernetics as a critical theory tool is also sort of developing. Here in like the first mention of cybernetics in her essay happens in like page 5. And it also introduces like the figure of the cyborg that she's talking about a little bit. So let me just launch into that real quick. Quote, a cyborg is a cybernetic organism, a hybrid machine and organism, a creature of social reality as well as a creature of fiction. Social reality is lived social relations, our most important political construction, a world-changing fiction. The international women's movement have constructed women's experience as well as uncovered or discovered this crucial collective object. This experience is a fiction and fact of the most crucial political kind. Unquote. So, like, right away, we see that she is sort of introducing the figure of the cyborg as a sort of thing that exists between fact and fiction, that is both like of fact and of fiction. And I think that she's very interested in using the imagination to extend the realm of the political, and vice versa. You know, it's a post-structuralist take on like what is an identity that we care about, and like what is an identity not only that we care about but that we have agency through. Like, yeah, how does it change our agency to figure ourselves differently? You know, and I feel like cybernetics definitely factors into this a lot. I think that she talks about these like circuits that women and that all sorts of people get sort of put into and caught up within. And she sort of anticipates the way that like the development of technology has indeed really incorporated us all into this sort of integrated circuit, as she calls it. You know, very acutely. But I mean, in the 80s, a lot of people were also anticipating similar things. In the 80s and 90s, people were definitely seeing this world that we live in now coming. Like The Matrix is another example of that.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, in terms of the like illusion and seeing it coming and sci-fi almost being the vehicle for seeing what our potential and or actualizing futures are, really struck me as you were saying, Carson, because it was so old and that Star Wars being referenced was like kind of, it felt archaic, right, to reference that specific type of movie, and that to use that as a reference point for the cyborg and cybernetics. I felt like I was reading, like uncovering like an ancient tome about technology. So it felt good to see the Matrix, I guess, right? To use a 2000s reference and know that it's ancient and constantly evolving.
I had just a note on like just something that you had brought up, Jackie. That's like I'm interested in this, like how she's talking about choice as like to intentionally create like a political myth, and also like later she talks about choice, like choice in relation to self and subjectivity and the historical like formation of like a Western subject or a Western self, and like that. I'd have to here. Let me find it. But it was like talking about choice as like a liberal here. Oh, okay. About like becoming cyborgs and like a cyborg politics. And she writes, cyborg politics insists on noise, on disruption, gender, desire, modes of reproduction of Western identity, nature and culture, body and mind, master and slave. We did not originally choose to be cyborgs, but choice grounds a liberal politics and epistemology that imagines the reproduction of individuals before the wider replications of texts. And I was, pretty struck by like this. I don't know, like if we, I think it ties into her ideas of like in this feminist genealogy of like kin and kinship and like a chosen kin as opposed to blood, and like a family based on blood or something, or even like a family based on purely human actors or something, like this expansion into like you can choose kin to be outside of just human, you can choose to extend kinship and extend, I don't know, not identity, but like this.
Yeah.
There felt like this tension between like choice as like this Western like liberal selfhood subject sort of thing, but then choice also as like like an agency of you don't have to. Actually, I really liked in the beginning that it was talks about like affinity, not identity. And from like an outside reading, there was I read something that was talking about like her like hermeneutics of adventure as opposed to a hermeneutics of fidelity. So it's like this constant choice, agency, like change, transformation of like blowing up what is possible, and why change, why do something differently, why choose differently.
Well, I don't know if like I think that there's a little bit maybe of a adjustment I would have on that approach. I think that it's not so much. I mean, there is the choice resides in how you see yourself, but the more to the point, I think that, and she has said in other texts as well that she is someone to muddy the waters. She's not someone to clarify them. But she's saying that man itself is a fiction. Like humanity is a fiction. But so is the cyborg, right? But so then like which one gives you more acute understanding of the situation that we're in? Because here's another quote from page 32. Quote, human beings, like any other component or subsystem, must be localized in a system architecture whose basic modes of operation are probabilistic statistical. No objects, spaces, or bodies are sacred in themselves. Any component can be interfaced with any other if the proper standard, the proper code, can be constructed for processing signals in a common language, unquote. I think that the fact of the essay being, as she says in the first sentence, a ironic posture in some sense, is fixes the situation that she's articulating, where it's not like she is like, oh, I want to be a cyborg, let's be cyborgs. It's like, this is a way to understand the situation we're in and to sort of mock the telos of the like industrial sort of like technologically advancing world, while also saying this is the world we live in. Like, yes, we incorporate so much of the technology that the system forces upon us, and it is part of us too. So like, how do we occupy that in, like, how do we understand our position within that? Like, I think that choosing to be a part of it isn't so much the thing as much as it is like choosing to understand your relationship with it. Same with interspecies relationships. It's not like you're like, oh, now I'm a monkey. I describe myself as a wolf or something. It's like, no, I have microbes inside of me. My ecosystem is like full of other, contingent communities that are all like, necessitate this sort of commingling, this coexistence. It's not so much a I want to be a moth now. I want to be like a otherkin. It's like you literally are. Like everyone is, because they have these shared, grounded like existences. And I think that sort of like existence within this sort of like shifty position of like non-innocent trying to figure out where we are is like a big part of her writing that I really vibe with, and that I think I'm into when it comes to the mutant as well. Because like the mutant is like born often from like toxins that are caused by like crazy horrible shit, and all this like capitalist stuff that I don't want to have truck with, and yet I do. Like I am born because of that. Like, I come about because of the same system that I have so many issues with. So how do I own that? How do I own the fact that I'm like part of this like toxic system, and that it's drastically altering everything, while maintaining some kind of like ethics within that?
Time to introduce the LAG. The reference point that I have for the LAG was an action that Haraway took part of at a nuclear testing site in Nevada, and she was a part of like I think the group got permission from the indigenous stewards of the land to go and like have the action on that site, and while they were being arrested or harassed by the authorities, mention like that they were actually trespassers and they had proper permissions to be there. But yeah, that was just my like conflating those two things of the idea that yes, this is a fiction. They're confronting two fictions, right? I don't want to say that the indigenous folks have a fiction, but their concepts of self and identity and land ownership is competing with the U.S. imperial concepts of land ownership.
Like what's another word for fiction? Another word for fiction is story. And I think that like story and narrative is something that she focuses on as well. It's like what she has access to is an ironic one to some extent. But it does still shape. It does genuinely shape the way that we are able to narrativize our own existence, and that doesn't just simply magically alter things. Although, again, like the terms of magic to me are kind of maybe it is magical, but like, but it more so exposes the entanglements. It like this is the situation we're in. how do we form stories that offer us navigability within it? And yeah, like she references the LAG, this like Livermore Action Group that was like this like anti-nuclear group that was happening in the 80s. And it's funny because I feel like nuclear power and like cybernetics are two different realms of the 80s approaching the 90s of like these sort of like apocalyptic sort of like technological advancements that people were seeing and sort of like riffing off of. All these different mutant shows, all these different ideas of like superhero mutants and like different ways that I mean, pop culture is full of references to mutants coming from this sort of like fear of and interest in nuclear stuff and like biotic sort of development. Similarly, there's also this sort of cybernetic fixation. I mean, cyberpunk, the original cyberpunk role playing game was also developed in a similar time period by this like nerdy guy who's really fascinated in this like interchangeability of parts of the person. So like Cyberpunk 2077 being a product of that 80s sort of retrofuturism is a really interesting sort of like cornerstone here as well. But there's sort of like the RoboCop, like there's all these different sort of 80s 90s cinema pop culture moments that also reference a similar moment of wondering what it means to be changed by these technologies and like what sort of modes of like some of them are like sort of phobic of this change and other ones are sort of embracing them and being like, okay, like yeah, we're like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like let's like get into it.
But yeah, that kind of brings up a little bit of questions for me, because I couldn't quite tell when we talk about narrative, I guess stories or fictions or like ideas or illusions of self, and how we are interacting with the stories that are imposed upon us. That got confusing to me because I kept thinking, all right, so you're using these reference points like language, like race, like feminism, these concepts in general, to give us a framework for how the cyborg identity fits through all of these. But are they competing or are they symbiotically growing together, or is that up to the individual? I was on the fence the entire time on that specific piece.
Yeah, I really think that like there's a lot of ambivalence in this text. I mean, and it's really interesting, I think, because the figure of the cyborg is so ambivalent. She constantly says that there's no telos. Like the cyborg is something that is against origins. There is no one origin for the cyborg. By default, like it is partial and it is like coming about through conjunctions of different things, sometimes violently. And she also references the military-industrial complex, and how like how its sort of violent impositions sort of like also give rise to cyborgian existence. I think
just to
yeah
chime in there, like I was gonna say before, the quote about like the cyborg is like the illegitimate offspring of militarism and patriarchal capitalism. But then she like has this funny line. It's like, but illegitimate offspring are seldom faithful to their parents or something. And I liked like this, yeah, like anti-origin, but like a very like a situatedness, like what Jackie was talking about, like a situatedness in like it felt like it in a historical moment to me, like kind of like this Marxist socialist, like, emphasis on like a material, like, I don't know, material conditions and like a historicity and, but like at the same time being, like, anti-origin because origin is like fake. Just recognizing like the ridiculousness of that.
Yeah, there's this claim that she makes that like Western humanism, which is like, I wish I had the quote on hand right now, but this is like key to me as well. Like the Western humanism, like has a mythic origin that it's always going back to, whether it's like the Greeks or the Romans or even just like America, right? Like Make America Great or whatever it is. There's always a mythic time in which we were whole, like we were the thing that we were supposed to be. And so like the cyborg is something that emerges out of this sort of like this project of the like of like um, Western imperialism. Like we get all these technological advancements, we get sort of like the to the point where everything's like micro chipped and micro surveilled, and where everyone is so entangled with these communications technologies, where we actually cannot help but understand that us are like the way that we see ourselves, like us ourselves are so partial. you know it's like the process itself reveals that we are like not whole. There is no unity, there's no prime unity, for us as people, or as like individuals, even to even reference in the first place. But yeah, I think that there's like I think that there's maybe a temptation to be like, or maybe there is a counterpoint to being like, well, some people do feel whole. Is it really so wrong for them to see themselves as human, or to see themselves as like, um, yeah. But at the same time, I just can't help but think about the ways that she kind of anticipates the way that social media has become so prevalent. And then I also think about the ways that social media has become so integral to the way that we actually have the ability to have any kind of countervailing understanding of what's happening in the world, like counter hegemonic um, popular feeling right now. Like social media, this product of this extractive economy, this like very much suspect tool of capital, also providing us pretty much the only avenue we have of like forming popular sentiment around Gaza, Sudan, XYZ. Like all these different popular movements where like, yeah. I think that moment of being like, well, it allows me access to all these things and allows us connection. But also it's formed by capital, and the internet itself is like a product of the military industrial complex. So like again, that's a good example of the quote Carson brought up, where it's like it comes from these suspect origins, or whatever you want to say. But then the use of the tools stray a little bit, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, this goes kind of in hand with the quote that Carson and I, the innocence and the corollary insistence on victimhood quote on page 21, right? Like, I mean, we mentioned sort of the master's tools or whatever in another episode, but it's kind of using what you got to create the affinities and create like maybe some sort of standing and forms of communication inside of I was going to say disfiguring pool, right? Like we are harmed by these, but we're also attempting to use, speaking about social media in particular, these items to create unity, to heal the wounds that we feel responsible for, right? And like this is like the clip that shows you something brief and then says stop scrolling. If you're scrolling, you're potentially complicit in the harm of my family. Speaking specifically about reels about Gaza right now on Instagram, and I really liked that in terms of scrappiness politically.
Yeah, I think there was a couple quotes that would be helpful. That just talking about like technology as like something that challenges the dualism of self and other. She wrote, "Not technology is oh shit, not clear who makes and who is made between human and machine. Um, in imagination and in other practice, machines can be prosthetic devices, intimate components, friendly selves." So it's kind of like I'm thinking about like technology as like I just read recently something that helped me think about like technology as simply just an like an externalizing of something, like fire to be like an externalizing of digestion, as like technology as like these prosthetic, like friendly, I don't know, like they can be. So we could look at like, you know, the ways that all of this fails in the ways that social media, you know, does not connect people, or movements. But yeah, I don't know. There's, yeah, we always have to like deal with this like connecting but not connecting. Um, I think actually I'm gonna read one of my like favorite quotes because I think it was like I kind of like feel like this kind of was the juice of a lot of this, because there's like this thread of like being multiple as being like, you know, yeah, like muddied, like illegitimate and like partial, but then like being one is also like problematic in its own ways. And I think that when we're talking about like being one or being multiple, we could like blow it up into many different things. I was thinking about like, you know, a very like schizo like type of analysis, and like being of like many minds, or being like, yeah, whatever. I'm gonna read the quote. To be one is to be autonomous, to be powerful, to be God. But to be one is to be an illusion. Yet to be other is to be multiple, without clear boundary, frayed, insubstantial. One is too few, but two are too many.
Yes, dude. Yeah. No, I think that like um it's hard to sort of describe in such a short amount of time the way that she anticipates the way that things are going right now. I think that all this was because she has these parts where she's saying that technology, we will see the identity reshaped in smaller and smaller television screens, essentially. You know, she talks about this like micro control process. She also talks about the inscribing of biological technologies, the inscriptions upon them of like of code of language, the idea that like, you know, genetics essentially is what she's talking about, but also all sorts of other like, you know, medical industrial innovations when it comes to prescriptions and, you know, molecularizing neurochemistry and biochemistry and everything. She is fearful of the, she, to paraphrase, the code that becomes one big code, like everything becoming one perfect language that is all understood. Because I think that her idea is that like when that happens, that is the final, you know, totalitarianism. If everything is meaningful to everyone the same way, that is like the worst outcome. And so yeah, like yeah, she has this insistence on not just being nothing, but also not being one thing. You know, it's yeah, it's like this space between being one thing and two things. I'm not two different people, but I'm also not even one person really. Like, you know, there's all these ways that you can unpack the ways that you are multiple. Like you exist differently with your friends and your family. You exist differently as a biological specimen today as you will tomorrow, or like sleeping versus awake. There's all these different ways that you can separate out the individual, but also there's something to the individual that's like really important too. I don't know. And so I feel like that sort of partiality is like an essential part of the cyborg. It's like part machine, part person. But both are fictions, but yeah, the cyborg unifies these partial identities.
Yeah, like just the takedown of the dualism, and like why I don't know, because I feel like that has been a thing for a while now, even kind of in like a popular discourse of like, oh, like, you know, a gender binary. I think it's like a pretty like well-known one of like, oh, there isn't a binary. There's a spectrum, and but it's kind of like, oh, but where do you go after that, or like what, like why is something like that, like why is a dualism like important in historical terms? And she was talking about like, yeah, dualisms have been persistent in Western traditions, systemic to the logics and practices of domination. So she's tying it into like, yeah, like this oneness, this one, which I feel like people just call fascism, or like what we probably understand to be fascism, of like, you know, the rule of one. But it's like like in order to have the rule of one, like you have to have like a dualism of like one, the self or whatever.
You need the self
the
and
other.
the other. The other has to be contrasted
Exactly.
neatly with the self.
Yeah, and I loved actually this part is like blah blah blah, the practices of domination of all constituted as others, whose task is to mirror the self. And I was happy to actually hear that, because it was like, oh shit, this is kind of like at least an answer to like, instead of just the like kind of bland like no more like binaries, no more dualisms, but it's like, why does that matter? And like also like, what is the purpose of a binary or a dualism? Like who has that served? And like, or what motives has that served in like very violent ways? And it's she's always like relating it back to like war, and like that she wrote this like in between, like amongst and in between like war, like Cold War. I can't remember. There was a part about this, if either of you remember what I'm talking about. But she talks a lot about war, and like war and information. And I think she called it, the one part that I really liked, like informatics of domination, which also sounded a lot really similar to like, if people have read Empire before, it was very much, yeah, like right up the alley. But again, it like preceded that, which I was like, this is sick. I mean, but I also really liked that part about the like the resisting the one perfect like communicable language, which in resisting like the codifying of everything. Yeah, I mean, it did like, yeah, she I don't know, had like a premonition prior to a lot of stuff that we see now.
Talking about war a little bit, something I was reminded about when I was rereading this essay this time around was the like Achille Mbembe has a book called Necropolitics, and he at one point, which is about it's sort of you know, it's a continuing and sort of rebutting in some ways the biopolitics of like Foucault and like the sort of like contemporary Western thought, trying to analyze like the societies of control that we live under. He's like trying to sort of point that genealogy towards the like mass, not only like how we make people live and how we make systems and like lives, how we like manufacture them positively, but also like how we industrialize and make essential certain deaths. But part of like I remember a certain fragment of his discussions. I don't remember if it's in the book or if it's in a lecture that he did or both. But like he has this moment where he's talking about the technologies of war that we use, and he at one point says like he brings up this point that like the relationship between instrument and user has become a little bit, it's mutually constitutive. This is something that Haraway also anticipates here, is this idea that the technology and the user of the technology meld to the point where their agencies actually become hard to parse. Whose agency is whose. And like Achille Mbembe says, like provocatively, like this is essentially animism. Like welcome back to animism. But I thought that was really interesting in the context of like weapons of war and technologies of war. I think that in Israel and I mean in Palestine right now, we see like AI being a huge component of the way that targeting is carried out. AI being the thing that chooses the targets, and then people pressing the buttons to actually carry out the executions. Who's deciding what? I don't want to take away any sort of like guilt from anybody, but at the same time, like you also have to think about the capitalist element of the military-industrial complex being a huge component in why this is happening, and like the realty component of it as well. Like they need new spots to open up, new fronts to open up to build more condos and shit. So all those things determine what happens as well. The capital interests, the interests of like machinic accrual of capital are they're moving. You can call it demonic or you can call it like cybernetic, but these things are also moving us as much as we are moving them. And like, who is the us and who is the them there? It's not so neatly human, non-human.
Yeah, I got a quote for this just to tag on. Like, yeah, one is too few and two is only one possibility. The machine is not an it to be animated, but an aspect of embodiment. The machine is not an it to be animated, worshipped, and dominated. The machine is us, our processes, an aspect of our embodiment. We can be responsible for machines. They do not dominate or threaten us. We are responsible for boundaries. We are they. Yeah, I was, because like there's this always this like argument that like what's a stupid one like like oh, guns don't kill people, like people kill people, and like this idea that I don't know, like I don't actually really have much to say about that. I was just like thinking about something like AI and like drone strikes and like like really high tech like warfare that I feel like it's just like obliterating like culpability for things all the time, that it's like, oh, if you just create basically an automated atmosphere of war, that there can never be any blame for anything. Like nobody can be blamed for this or that, and even if they, I don't know, but like I'm not sure if that like really works. Like I think that it maybe is the goal for like whatever, like a fascist imperialist project, but like a lot of us obviously see through it. But like I'm just thinking about like if we're talking about like this melding of things and like this informatics of domination, of this tightening, and like I'm thinking about too about like hostile design as like, oh, then basically like you're automating like this what did you just say, Jackie, like this you're automating like this necessity of death of like certain others, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's like as
If you all have
integral.
anything.
It's as integral to this society of control we live in as the way that we are constructed to live. Like our lives in the United States are conditioned in certain ways. Like we are made to live in certain ways, just like the livestock we damn eat every day. But just
Yeah,
as
this goes
essential,
back to the
yeah, that's exactly what it is. The livestock are made to live and made to die, and those are both essential parts of the world we live in. Same, like we are the parts that are made to live in certain ways, and then there are other parts of the world and parts of us that are made to die in certain ways. Like those are both essential components. So like in that
yeah.
way too, it's almost cyborgian too, because it has this bifurcation of like death and life. There's like the living component and the dead component.
Yeah.
Um,
And I feel like to connect it to like the last podcast episode, I feel like this was actually what a lot of people that Josh that you interviewed were getting at with like this frustration of like, I am part of the problem. Like I am part of this machine of death and war. And how do I not be? Like, how do I resist somehow? And like, of course that we have to, but we do have to also recognize what Jackie's saying, and I think also what a lot of like Donna Haraway is saying is like this lack of innocence, that like none of us are whole, like wholly good actors, which I feel like is a kind of a classic like postmodern refrain. But and then you could go into like a pretty nihilistic like realm of like, oh well, then none of my choices matter. Why do this and this if everything I do like has some like, sorry, I'm like saying it as if it's like sarcastic or something, but I mean I struggle with this all the time myself, where it's like, why make these like small changes if like all of like, yeah, if a huge part of your existence is wrapped up in the death of others and the suffering of others, then it's like, I don't know. Yeah. You said something, Jackie, last time also about like, I think it was something about like, oh, your like existence, and I feel like, okay, this gets into her like animal human, like making that like messy and expanding that, where it's like does your existence like require the death and suffering of others? Like I know that in like current like contemporary spheres, like, yeah, I don't know, maybe there's no like whole answer or something, that it's like it's a yes and no, but and I don't know if it's like, I guess what I'm getting at is this thing on the left, if we're talking about like left politics, of like getting there, of like where there is no that, like, oh, where a time before like capitalism or colonialism, that like there was a more whole connection to the world, and there wasn't like this automated like suffering machine. I don't know how else to describe it, but
Can't quite find a quote that relates to this, but in terms of wholeness and sort of the nihilism thing that you had mentioned, um, one of the fears of mine is that part of like the resistance is also anticipated by the opposition, that we're actually just a part of creating the like, I guess, intellectual war between, to use, the dichotomy of right and left, or like the good versus evil battle, and muddying those waters. We were just necessary opposition to keep that ideology running. So, using Israel, Palestine, for example, just are words of resistance against the structure that makes Israel something that that the West generally is backing and supporting. Um, like we are necessary in order to keep that image of this is right. Look at what all the enemies are coming forth out of the woodwork to try to destroy your comforts, your homes, the Jews, etc. So it's like, um, there's a cyborg myth working on the opposite end as well. That's terrifying. That I'm also a part of their narrative, and that feels like a container, in ways that I think Haraway's trying to get us out of, but also is not clearly stating that we're getting out of, which is just a scary idea for me. And I couldn't find a quote for it. I'm sorry, folks.
No, I think I might have a quote that's helpful, like, because I'm going to tie in where she talks about like sci-fi, science fiction, but specifically like women of color sci-fi and like feminist sci-fi. Here, I'll just read this. Yeah, because like language and story and like as tools, like, so she says, releasing the play of writing is deadly serious. This time, that power must be neither phallic nor innocent. Cyborg writing must not be about the fall, the imagination of a once upon a time wholeness before language, before writing, before man. Cyborg writing is about the power to survive, not on the basis of original innocence, but on the basis of seizing the tools to mark the world that marked them as other. Yeah, and I feel like you two would actually have a lot better things to say, both about like the uses of story and sci-fi, and also Josh, we were talking a bit before about like the use of like women of color as like a political strategy, and like what she has to say about that. If either of you wanted to touch on those things.
A couple more quotes just to sort of continue fertilizing the ground here. Quote, networking is both a feminist practice and a multinational corporate strategy. Weaving is for oppositional cyborgs. Unquote. What the fuck does that mean?
I literally have that dog-eared, and it was that. Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah, same. I got that one down too.
That, yeah, like that's the terrifying thing about Instagram, right? Like, we're kind of using the network. We're beaming ourselves in, to use the sci-fi reference, to say, hey everyone, let's get together and fight the system. And then on the other end of it, it's they're taking our data, they're recording everything. They're like, these are the people that are your enemies. Look, we can let you splice these videos so you can do your pointing and your combative reels to do this. And like, I like the idea that weaving maybe gives hope for there's a more organic way of doing it when it brings people together. But I see you, Jackie. Go ahead.
Yeah, just another quote. Just to build, like maybe there's something, because I don't know what to make of these either. But another one is, quote, intensifications of hardship experienced worldwide in connection with the social relationships of science and technology are severe. But what people are experiencing is not transparently clear, and we lack sufficiently subtle connections for collectively building effective theories of experience. Unquote. This is pre-social media, so like but she has an emphasis as the essay goes on this like subtlety of framing experience. This like open-handed sort of like approach that's not defining experiences, but is something else that's like weaving them, right? Is this something that's answered by the quickness of social media? Maybe not, because I think that to go viral and to be therefore recognized on social media requires a certain kind of performance that like almost alienates you further. Like I don't know. Like
In 3A, like this is the idea of using English in the video, right? Like having a lingua franca for whatever, like money transfer, etc. And it's scary because of all the reasons we mentioned. I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that.
quote, writing has been crucial to the Western myth of the distinction between oral and written cultures, primitive and civilized mentalities, and more recently, to the erosion of that distinction in the postmodernist theories attacking the phallocentrism of the West, with its worship of the monotheistic, phallic, authoritative, and singular work, the unique and perfect name. Contests for the meaning of writing are a major form of contemporary political struggle. Yeah, and then it goes into the quote that Carson said before: releasing the play of writing is deadly serious. So, unquote. So, deadly serious. So, like, I don't know. I'm thinking about the way that brain rot videos exist on TikTok. I'm going back to it. What the Sigma? What the Sigma? Skibbity Israel. There's always been ways that language evades domination, like dominant language, hegemonic language, and then there's always like outskirts of it that are constantly evolving and mutating. Different types of colloquialisms and different vernaculars that are constantly sprout in all different directions. Do we like? How does that relate to code, for example? How does that relate to science? How does that relate to the online ecosystem? And I feel like online, the fact that brain rot videos get so much traction, I think is telling. Like that is a sort of decadent way that sort of adds noise in certain ways, without really doing anything. Without really, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it does say something though. I would like to do a brain rot video. I will say once again, but like, or episode, brain rot episode. But it seems decadent, and perhaps there's a reason why that's the type of poetry that we get on social media. I don't know. Like, not that there's no route for another one to emerge, but that's the one that we get because it fits our desires more. You know, I don't know. Just kind of riffing here a little bit.
Yeah, but leaning into the hedonics, right? Like, I also have this, as someone who's a little paranoid about surveillance, I have this sort of hope that there is so much information and so much clutter that it's going to be harder to do the AI pinpointing, right? There's going to be so much, like it needs physical objects to hold the transfer of ideas. And if there's so much information and it's too much to organize, and maybe this is also why the fear of AI, like there's going to be a sort of super non-organic thing that can sort data faster than organic and or physical things can. It's almost like, okay, there's so much clutter, but if the more and more there's clutter, the less and less the code can understand about the human experience because it lacks a trackable logic. You know, like the thing that we assume that AI will bring is order, but the human experience is chaos. And so if we keep sprouting chaos, right, and the more it tries to clutter, maybe there is a symbiosis there where we turn AI into something that's much more chaotic. I mean, ChatGPT can't give us correct answers anymore because there's so much, right? So that.
And I would say that like this is my critique, and I think that I would assume that Haraway would actually share this, but like of the singularity, I think that people have this because like she talks towards the end of their essay about this idea that like part of the part of the telos of the original myth, this idea that we were Romans once, that we are Homo sapiens, that we are human. Part of that myth is also necessitates, and one day we will no longer be. We will no longer be human. We will no longer be Romans. We will fall. Like there's going to be an apocalypse. People will, all these different apocalyptic thinking is what it is. If there's a beginning, a neat beginning to what we are, there must be a neat end to it as well. Fuck. Please, what was I fucking saying? Fuck. Shit.
It's weird because that's kind of like Jackie.
Dude,
if you
I don't
come up
remember
with
the
it, just
fuck.
interject.
Oh, it's gonna be such a good point. Fuck.
It's weird because
It's singularity.
Okay, thank you. Okay, people assume that AI is going to go towards a singularity because it's like, oh, it's a super intelligent thing. It will go towards the singularity. The thing is, if you're more intelligent, that doesn't mean that you're going to have a local fixed idea of what is real. The thing is that like reality is fucking chaotic. That's the thing. Like there is no one end. And so there's also no one unity. So like a super intelligent cyborg or just a super intelligent AI, if it were truly like intelligent, it wouldn't unify. It would have a million different tentacles, a million different cords linking it to a million different realities. And that's the world we live. I mean that's truth. Truth is not simple. You know what I mean?
This is how my version of this ends, or sorry, my version of Cyborg Manifesto ends. Cyborg imagery can suggest a way out of the maze of dualisms in which we have explained our bodies and our tools to ourselves. This is a dream not of a common language, but of a powerful infidel heteroglossia, which I'm taking to be basically what you're talking about, like an unfaithful many, that it's not towards something. It's not towards anyways. It is an imagination of a feminist speaking in tongues to strike fear into the circuits of the super savers of the new right. We all know. It means both building and destroying destroying machines, identities, categories, relationships, spaces, stories. Though both are bound in a spiral dance, I would rather be a cyborg than a goddess.
You know what? That perfect segue, because I was going to say, even the concept of apotheosis, if we get into sort of like Lovecraftian, eldritch horror concepts of what gods are, it is chaos. It is unknowable to the point where it's mind breaking, and the thing is constantly just destroying itself and other things. In some ways, I know that sometimes it has this sort of deist idea that would be the goddess that Haraway is running away from, but like in the apocalyptic, like the end thing, there's something that comes to replace it to create the replica, but that is not consistent with life, nor what I would say the idea of apotheosis is. Even if we consider, the Abrahamic faiths, specifically the Christian Bible, every time they can't look at God, angels scare people, blind people, burn things, right? Like there's destruction in what the God is supposed to be, and it's supposed to be awful, and it's supposed to be horrific to some extent.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up when Jackie you were talking about that, it's interesting that this also fits of if we were once this, then that has to end, and that there's a fall, but that I don't know, it's weird because this kind of fits into a Christian, what's that word, eschatology, eschatological, a end, a fall, a rapture, and it's weird, I don't know. Maybe it's not actually a contradiction, but she's pretty like critical of like Christian like creationism, like overtly in this. And said, I think she said it was like should be considered child abuse to like teach Christian creationism.
Yeah, and she comes from a religious background too, and she like talks about
Yeah, she's like a lapsed Catholic.
Yeah, the crazy feeling of being from a Catholic background and then studying biological sciences and having that being her like field of study. And then I do think that she knits a compelling weaving of the two, actually, because like theology,
Yeah.
like and science, how do you hybridize those in a situated Marxist feminist way?
Yeah.
It's really chaotic. Is the answer? There's no really easy answer. Like you just have to write a fucking essays about cyborgs.
Yeah, she wrote some. I'd listened to like an interview or something. She said like, also she's hilarious. I don't know if you've either.
Anyone listening should absolutely listen to her speak. She has really amazing.
It's insane.
You gotta watch. Okay, I'm also a really big fan of the more recent stuff. Like I urge everyone listening to go watch anything about making kin in the Thulu scene. Yeah, it's a really incredible body of work she has.
I mean, she really went on. Also, she went on this dog thing. Like that was her whole thing. Like it seems like I don't know a ton about this, but it seems like after the cyborg, she maybe like kind of eschewed the cyborg thing a little bit and was like, actually, it's all about dogs now. And then wrote like the companion species manifesto.
She has a. That's her whole thing is making oddkin, making and it is relating to one of the first parts of this conversation we had. It's like, is it a choice to have these connections? Technically, no. But is it a choice to respect them and like to actually acknowledge these connections and to choose to like step up? It's sort of like any family. Like if you can choose to be there, or you can choose not to some extent.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to bring up kind of. I feel like that's like a feminist like strain, specifically like a women of color like feminism strain of like this affinity like over identity, and that's like where women of color develops from as like a political like organizing tool.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm going off
I wish
base
we had
here,
like
but
another like 2 hours, because like she really does pay a lot of attention to all these different subcategories of people, but like and focuses on the cyborg as like a mantle through which you can understand all these things. For example, women of color. What does it mean for us to come to a point where like people are described as women of color? Those are multiple different layers through which you are bifurcated, and like actually, your identity is built off of cordoning you off from other people. So it's like multiple forms of partiality. To be a woman of color is like multiple forms of partiality. But then, of course, women of color have their own ability to generate things that are generative and important cultural artifacts that stand in the face of the sort of idea of being partial to begin with, or anything to do with that. But the framing of and the existence within America as like a woman and a woman of color are like different ways that you're like sort of like sectioned off. Like, man, there's so many different realms that we could still delve into with this essay. There's just there really is a lot. Yeah, but yeah, I feel like we covered a lot. Is there anything else that you guys did want to like spend a little bit of time on as far as the essay is concerned?
I mean, yeah, this is good, but when we return to this, I want to just talk about the innocence stuff a little bit. But yeah, no, we talked about it, but I want to dive deeper into it because I thought that's the big conundrum for me because of my own personal fears of like, okay, I'm not innocent. I'm trying to use this for a good thing, but I'm also sort of plugging myself into a system that I disagree with.
I feel like how she's using this maybe just to like frame it within her work is she's like using this in terms of like I don't know, like a taking down of like this type of feminism that like I think she says is like overly like organic, and I think she's talking a lot about innocence in terms of like the construction of womanhood and femininity, and that like I'm thinking of like the like God as a woman, like here just because of this quote. Like she says, we cannot go back ideologically or materially. It's not just that God is dead, so is the goddess. I don't know, I just feel like she's like, yeah, we could go into a bunch of stuff about the innocence, the wholeness, origins. Like, I feel like actually we touched on quite a bit of it, but like, and I don't have really like, you know, a overtly like Christian background, but I love talking about this stuff, and I feel like but yeah, anyways, like how she's framing it, like the context of like in like a debate within feminism, I feel like is maybe where that is like situated.
I mean, yes, but it's also a debate. I mean, yeah, and that's the thing about this essay. I think that each sentence is so dense. There's a lot of intentionality into the actual verbiage of every phrase. But she brings in threads. The text is also very dense with like threads politically. She's also talking about, you know, Marxism, socialism, industrialism, technology in general. All these things are non-innocent, you know, like, yeah. In addition to feminism, and they all intersect, you know. Yeah, that's what I really like about her is like it's something. It's like a psychedelic, you know. It helps you expand your ability to think, and you know what I mean. It's fucking cool. I just really like that shit. You know, her and like Derrida and like Deleuze and people like that are people that make me feel like I'm tripping, like when I'm really reading it, you know. And I really like that. And it's also poetic, like especially her newer stuff is like fucking beautiful. There's some really beautiful phrases. I don't know. I'm just a big fan. Yeah, I'm a stan. And I think that she's been accused of being like a lib, you know. But like, I don't really give a fuck. It's just fucking beautiful art, in my opinion. You know, like it helps you think. Like, I don't really give a fuck.
Interesting. Yeah, I was gonna say that I got a bit like Donna Haraway pilled, a bit cyborg pilled.
Oh yeah, let's go.
After reading this,
let's all like tongue kiss our dogs after this, and like and like play and like I don't know, like play some like 80s like girl techno. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I shared a video with someone that was specifically like a woman of color rejecting being tongue kissed by a dog in her mouth.
Yeah, that's another like divisive. It's a subordinate act because it really divides you off from non-white people if you're tongue kissing a dog.
I was about to say, I'm like, sorry, I'm not about that life.
It really cordons you off from other elements of existence.
Hey, you know, y'all can have that cyborg appendage. I'll have mine. Oof.
Yeah.
Thank you all. I mean, y'all Haraway heads have really. I actually am really excited. I only have like the tidbits, and thank you for putting me on the ride. I'm like, I know I need to finish, and I have the big, like I have a bunch of things in here, with the notes, and I think the hard part is tracking it all, because when you come back to things, it's like I get obsessed with my particular thread. I think that's just maybe me falling into the Haraway trap, which is but see, this is you are non-innocent, but you're also like forcing yourself into a box, and that's part of your myth, and then unraveling it kind of sucks for me, at least. Like it kind of I feel that fear every time I'm just a meat for the grinder.
sort of use this hesitancy and questioning to exit out of this episode, while also I was also really wondering, how do we see the differences between what she calls a cyborg and what we're calling a mutant? And also, like, how does, also thinking about how to mutate our manifesto here. Currently, our manifesto is shape change, jump in the mutagenic pool, and drown with friends again and again. How is the mutant similar? How is it different than the cyborg?
Again, maybe I'm just being boring and like making like specific interjections, but like I feel like it's important that this was like a period for her of like the cyborg, and that like it seems like she moved away from that towards the animal, because the cyborg is specifically, the definition is like a cybernetic, human and machine. And it's like,
I mean, but she was talking about animals in this essay. She was talking about like the partiality, how it connects you to animals in this essay. Like she was already on that tip, I think it was just the phrasing that changed, but yeah.
But I mean, if the definition is like, I don't know. I just feel like after the Indra Sinha episode and like the animality and like a human animality, whatever, like the crossover there, and I feel like that where it's different is when we're talking about the machine. We're not talking about life, I don't think. We're not talking, but when we're talking about life, we are talking about animals. Like we are talking about the whatever, the realm of life. Maybe the only thing that like gets like muddies this a little bit is like AI, but I don't even actually think the argument is like that strong that that's like actual intelligence or actual life or whatever. So like that's all.
Yeah, I would personally say that like many of these machines are already at least spirited in some way. And she has this, man, I feel like we could spend another 2 hours on this, but she has a lot of things where she collapses the distinction between these machines that used to be haunted. We used to have haunted machines, spirited machines, and then we would have people. Whereas now it seems like the relationship is so connected that like the machine and the person almost share a spirit. The same would be said about animals as well, because like if you're a human, you're also an animal, and also by extension, all these different citizens that are also animals, like pigeons and rats and cockroaches and all sorts of different things exist in tandem with machines. So like cyborgs are not human necessarily, but like but yeah, the point is, I mean, yeah, that is a good point. Like the mutant connotes a more fleshly existence, a more like embodied, existence. It's not so like bifurcated necessarily. Maybe that's a distinction too. Like the cyborg is like part this, part that, whereas the mutant is like a change of something. Maybe, I don't know.
That's maybe more, yeah, like that at least in, I know that the cyborg is about not being like two distinct things that are now meshed into one. I don't know. There's a really hard way of talking about all this where it's like 2 1 2 1,
Yeah.
like all very like 1 into 2, 2 into 1, 1 into 2, and like
it's so non-binary.
and a lot of the,
Holy Trinity.
a lot of this. What's
shit.
the secret third thing?
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah, I was just saying, Catholic background, you gotta add that.
That's
Something's
true.
happening.
That's
Yeah.
true. There's literally like the flesh and the spirit, and then there's another thing.
Body. Oh yeah, and then the father, right? The progenitor, or not progenitor. That's the wrong word. But the sire and the scion, and then the thing between the two.
That's crazy.
I just wanted to say one thing as a distinction between mutant and cyborg. But I think maybe, and I don't know how this lands you, where there's a little bit more um, agency as being a thing as amalgamated parts versus being sort of an object acted upon as a mutant, where you are changing in response to like external things, and maybe that means you have to adapt by grabbing something and putting it on your arm. But a cyborg almost implies I am taking this to create, or and again, I'm oversimplifying because it's not the single subject seeing the other and then fusing in that way, but more so that you recognize a constellation of ideas, objects in machinery. Whereas I feel like the mutant is like the transfigured, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and of course they've got a lot of mutual overlap. But yeah, that's a great point actually. The mutant is not something that necessarily consciously chooses an adaptation. Whereas a cyborg in like Cyberpunk 2077 or Cyberpunk, which again can come around in the 80s, it's like I'm gonna chop off my arm and get like a fucking gorilla arm, or I'm gonna take out my eyes and put in laser eyes. It's like it connotes a willful adoption. Even though Haraway sketches out that like we're all in the situation whether we want to or not. Like a lot of people are from the third world, quote unquote, are cyborgs by fucking force. Don't get me wrong. But even that has sort of like an agent putting them in that specific position. We could even get into some darker territories where this has literally happened, where people like throughout history, like you meld person and machine by force. But either way, whether it's you doing it or you doing it to someone else, you are doing it on purpose. Whereas the mutant emerges either on purpose or not, but like oftentimes not on purpose, and oftentimes by failure or by like misrecognition or like by just simply existing in a unique way. So like it's not something that you choose, it's something that you just are, yeah.
She had an interesting part at the end, if either of you like the part about like salamanders and like chopping. I just was thinking about this, like losing a limb, and she specifically talks about mutants.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, she talks about mutation. Let me try and find it. For salamanders, regeneration after injury, such as the loss of a limb, involves regrowth of structure and restoration of function with the constant possibility of twinning or other odd topographical productions at the site of former injury. The regrown limb can be monstrous, duplicated, potent. We've all been injured profoundly. We require regeneration, not rebirth. And the possibilities for our reconstitution. It doesn't have. I thought it had the word mutant in there.
Mine does. Maybe in like it's a little bit before. Mine did it in parentheses.
Yeah, it definitely had it somewhere, but maybe it was right before then. But
you got it.
I was just thinking about that with
Josh got it.
We don't need organic holism to give impermeable wholeness. The total woman and her feminist variance mutants ? Is that it?
Yes, the total feminist in her. Say it again.
The total woman and her feminist variants, quote unquote, are parentheses mutants ?
Yes,
I had it wrong. Not salamanders, women.
Not salamanders, women. No, yeah, dude. Feminists. That's exactly it. Because like another thing about this, when you start getting on that feminism pill, you're like, okay, I care about women now. Oh wait, now I care about black women. Oh wait, now I care about neurodivergent women. Oh, now I care about non-binary people. Now I care about all types of people. Oh wait,
and what about dogs?
Now I care about dogs. Oh shit, fuck. Before you know it, I care about bats. I care about otters. I care about fucking jellyfish. Before you know it, you're caring about machines. You're caring about, and then it connects you. Like the true path of the feminist is the path of the ecofeminist, and is the path of the mutant.
Yeah. What's so funny? Well, one that she has this quote that I think also I listened to, that she was talking about like dog fiction as like feminist fiction and like vice versa. That like I don't know. It was like a really funny line. But also, I'm just gonna like, I plug like one thing that like, I feel like the if we're talking about like social media and Instagram and stuff, I've seen like a couple of people's like arcs go from like very like political like theory accounts to just straight up animal stuff, just
Posting
like
unlikely animal
videos.
friendships.
Yeah, very like, but not just that, but very like whale, deer, seal centered content. I'm thinking of very specific people, but it's just like a funny turn. No, I mean I think it's what we're talking about.
Yes,
No,
the
I know, that's why I'm
specificity of
laughing.
caring about a certain located species and community, I admire. Yeah, but there is something about keeping a focus on, I think that it would be really interesting, and I've seen people post about the ecological devastation in Palestine, which is like, I think some people would hear that as very distasteful. Because it's like, okay, you care about these fucking grasses and fucking olive trees. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
People are fucking dying.
Yeah,
But it's like,
but the thing is, it's all
it's all fucking
Yeah,
same.
'cause I was gonna
and like,
say-
it affects us the same way. Like it's our fucking body, and in some way, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
such a dumb
Yeah.
fucking stoner thing to say, but
Also, this goes back to way back when. Jackie, I think you might have been a part of this conversation as well. But the empathy trap. Do you remember when I was obsessed with that? Like empathy being not the route to connecting all people because it's going to be. Anyway, we don't have to talk about it. I know we're way over. Sorry. But that ending. Sorry. I want to talk about empathy later.
empathy is
and
a
it's,
huge thing for me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's actually way more complicated than people give it credit for. To be truly
Mm-hmm.
empathic also means a certain type of death,
Right.
And also,
And, like,
what does it do? What does it do if you're truly being empathic? Like, what does empathy do by itself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to? Does anybody have anything that's calling to them to add to the manifesto? Jackie, if you want to read it one more time.
Shape change, jump
Shape
in the
change.
mutagenic pool, and drown
Jump in
with
the mutagenic
friends
pool
again
and drown
and
with
again.
friends again and again. I did have something. I just wanted, I feel like a refrain for me throughout this was like the no one and not two. Or like not one, not two. But it's very, very simple.
We could say, jump in the mutagenic pool and drown with friends. Or we could preface this whole thing. I think, we can also add like whole sentences.
Oh, true. We can start at the beginning. If this is about anti-origins, we're gonna go to the non-innocent
We could
origins.
say, we could just
of
say not
one and not two.
So, like, just simply that? Not one, not two, shape change.
I have a specific. Yeah,
What?
that was all that I was thinking about.
What?
No one, not two.
No one, not two?
But if you have any adaptations, mutations.
I think that kind of... What if we take out the jump? Because I feel like that kind of sounds like it rhymes and has a good timbre to it. Let me read it to you. No one, not two. Shape change in the mutagenic pool and drown with friends again and again.
That kind of hot. That I like that. I was gonna say that rock.
Yeah. That rocks too much. Yeah. I like that.
Do we like it?
I do. Here's the thing: the again and again. I'm like, we can always reverse it all the way back to shape change. It's hopeful
Yeah, we could restart from the seed, yeah.
at any time, again and again.
I'm curious to see what this no one, not two will produce. And also the again and again. I think that I like it how it is right now. Because I feel like it's... Yeah. No one, not two. What if it's simply this? What if we take out the middle part? No one, not two. Again and again. I don't know. Let's do it.
Whoa.
Hey. No, yeah.
Or we could just say no one, not two, shape change again. And no, I think it actually rhymes right now. It's actually kind of a nice
I would keep
poem.
it how you read it was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Do you guys want to read it?
I got
if I send it to the chat?
Oh.
Should we all read it at the same time? As the
Yeah, I was about to
outro?
say simultaneously.
Is there anything you guys would like to plug before then? Or anything you want to reference, or any last... I will say that Donna Haraway relates to A Cyborg Manifesto relates to so many different things that I would like to cover. Xenofeminism as a route. This sort of ecofeminist sort of approach. Achille and Bembe. Deleuze.
Yeah,
there's so many
gotta
different
do
routes.
like a black sci-fi dive of like
Oh man.
like Octavia Butler.
Yeah.
Samuel
Oh yes.
Delany.
She talks about Octavia Butler a lot, and I would love to talk about
Yeah, and Samuel Delany, too.
Xenogenesis. That's like a foundational text for me as well.
Yeah, we should do something on all that.
I would love that.
All right. Yeah, I can't find the chat function, but if you
It's the bubble at the top.
oh yeah, the bubble.
Are we ready? Should we just say it together chaotically?
No
Okay.
one.
Before we say this, thank you everyone for listening. Follow us on whatever you're listening on. Rate us 5 stars on Spotify, please. Follow us on Instagram, Mutant Manifesto, and let us know what episodes you'd like to do. If you would like to collaborate with us, we are looking for that. Yeah, dude. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Shall we?
No one.
No
not
one.
two.
Not
Two.
two.
Shape
Shape
change.
Shape change
Mutagenic
in the mutagenic pool.
and drown with friends.
Drowned with friends.
Again.
Again and again.
And again.
The sign of the cross.